welcome back to the Faith-Driven Entrepreneur video series. We're so glad that you've joined us over these past 7 sessions, and this is our last session. And in this session, we're going to talk about what our faith means as we minister in not just deed, but also in word. And what might it even look like to be able to minister with our faith through the giftings we have in our businesses, even overseas, as we share the good news about why we do what we do. So check out this video and the teaching that JD has, and I'll join you at the end. Thanks for being with us.
Really wanted to be an investigative reporter that traveled the world and wrote about and reported on issues that we're facing, specifically women and girls that were living in extreme poverty and in conflict and post-conflict zones. So I went to journalism school. I really kind of started thinking on a global level of who are those people. But what was super profound to me was that when I tried to imagine the face of one girl who had grown up in extreme poverty, I couldn't imagine anyone because I didn't know a single girl. It was like I said I really cared about this issue. I said I was super passionate about, global gender injustice and women and girls living in extreme poverty. And in this moment, it was kind of like the curtain got pulled back and it was like, but you don't actually have one friend who grew up in extreme poverty. And that was really profound and really convicting to me. And kind of in that moment, I felt like I had to kind of make a decision of okay, give up the ghost of this thing that you're really passionate about and just go build your life, do the corporate thing, make a lot of money, build the big house, or go actually make a friend. Go have your life actually be kind of tangled up in a part of this world that you say you really care about. So I bought a plane ticket to Uganda. I didn't have a job. I had no invitation. I didn't really have anything to do, but my new kind of goal and my new focus became okay, just go and meet one girl. Literally, when my parents asked me why I was moving to East Africa, I was like, guys, I'm moving to make a friend. And they're like, really? Can't you just join a running club like your sister? And that's kind of how my journey started. So I showed up and I really just kind of started exploring. I started asking questions that I thought were really interesting questions. I started trying to make friends and build a community. And it was through that process really of exploring that I became a part of an organization, a youth development organization. And by just being a part of this community, I kind of started becoming more and more aware of this really specific issue. And that issue was there's a 9-month gap in Uganda between high school and university. So students graduate, they have 9 months to go back home, find a job, save money to pay for university. And what was happening specifically with the girls is that they were graduating from this 2-year college prep program. They were testing into college, some top 5% of students in the country. They had all of this gusto and vision and excitement about the future, and then they were going back home to their villages, and 2 things were happening. 1, they couldn't find jobs. And 2, there was this really profound lack of social support. So I became really committed to these 25 women and to surely there's something that we could do. So I realized from an economic standpoint that I wanted to start a business, and 2, from a relational standpoint. It was I want to do something that's sink or swim together. We're doing something, and if you win, I win. We're taking the risk together. We're sharing in both the burden and then hopefully the upside of creating something together. And so I tried to start a chicken farm. That failed pretty quickly. It turns out I hate chickens. I didn't want to run a chicken farm, and the economics and business model side of it also didn't really pan out. And then next up, I decided to start a sandal company. So I had designed a pair of these funky, strappy sandals when I was in school. I wanted a pair of flip-flops that didn't flop. So I took a pair of old flip-flops and I kind of tore them apart and replaced the kind of plastic upper piece with a pair of ribbons, essentially, and I kind of had these really cool, funky, strappy flip-flops that didn't flop. So I was in Uganda, and I'm just brainstorming. At this point, I don't care what the business is. I'm just as long as the economics work out and we can employ young women for a 9-month gap, who cares what it is? So I started the process of kind of prototyping them, and do the materials exist in East Africa? Is this something I could teach 19-year-old women to make and to produce. And slowly, kind of these boxes started kind of getting checked off and like, yeah, that should work. And yeah, we could do that. And before I knew it, I was sitting down with some really bad prototypes of some really janky, not well-produced sandals and a little Word document of like how to make them. And I hired 3 young women, so Mary, Mercy, and Rebecca. And I basically promised these young women, I was like, okay, if you make these sandals during this 9-month gap between high school and university, I promise that you'll go to college next fall. And they were like, okay. I was like, okay. And then I came back to the US with several hundred pairs of sandals in my suitcase and started selling sandals out of the back of my car, which is, definitely what your parents want you doing with that journalism degree you earned. So when I came back to the US, my now husband, he actually proposed to me 4 days after I got back. We got married 4 months later. So here we are, we're like newlyweds. I'm peddling sandals. And at the end of that first summer, we had sold enough sandals to send Mary, Mercy, and Rebecca to university. And we were like, oh my gosh, this worked. Not only did the kind of impact side work, but people actually seem to really like these sandals. And we really kind of started dreaming about like, what if this wasn't just a project for Mary, Mercy, and Rebecca? What if this was legit? What if we started a company that could grow and could scale and could employ some of the brightest, most ambitious women in the entire country, could serve as a launch pad for them to continue on and become leaders in their community. And meanwhile, we, sold these products here in the US. And so we ended up here in Portland, Oregon. And so this is where we kind of said, okay, this is where we're gonna really establish our company and our business. And so we did that, and eventually we continued to grow. We started expanding our product line. So we knew all along that we didn't really want to just be a sandal company. We wanted to be a full lifestyle fashion brand. So we started sourcing different materials and products. Meanwhile, we were growing, our manufacturing in Uganda. So we continued to go and to grow, and we started hiring people here in Portland. We now have a staff of about 13 people that are here that do everything from marketing to sales to fulfillment and accounting. And we have a staff of about 60 over in Uganda that do design and development and manufacturing and logistics. We really believed in an impact that was full circle, that was from the time a product is made, the hand that made that product, all the way to the final sale, that we would be able to say like, hey, you're creating community and opportunity for women all across the supply chain. The defining belief behind our business is the belief of Imago Dei, that we are each created in the divine image of our Creator, and that we were created to create. Whether you are, the farmer that farmed that cattle, which is where our leather came from, the woman who is sewing the straps on that sandal, the lady who's cleaning her factory, all the way to the person who's doing our accounting and selling our product and packing and shipping it. How do we make sure that we're treating each one of those people according to this belief that you are sacred and that you were created in the image of God, and that you deserve to be treated with dignity and with respect? I could never have imagined what Seiko would grow into. We've now sent over 126 women onto university to become leaders in their community. This is a letter from Aggie, who actually started out as an intern with our company and is now our managing director. I showed up on the doorstep of a small house in Chicony where a bunch of women were making sandals to get by. As Seiko has grown from a group of ladies in a small house, and then a medium house, and now a workshop, I've grown from an intern on the doorstep to a manager, and now a woman with many stories and experiences. My walk with Seiko has brought tremendous changes to my life and incredible growth, and this is true for all of my fellow Seiko employees. As a company, I have seen it grown from just a bunch of ladies making a few sandals a month to a company that's igniting change and helping Ugandan women realize that we hold a special place in this world, and that with our hands, we can do greater things than what our society ever imagined for us. Seiko has brought a new hope, life, and given birth to dreams that were too far for us to reach, not because we could not, but because society made us think that we couldn't. The test of a great company is whether it has the ability to constantly manage and grow its operations while being true to its mission and its core values. It's a challenge that we here at Seiko Designs embrace because we recognize that there's always a bigger picture, a longer time horizon, and a broader world in which operating using our handmade products to connect the world that seemed so far from us.
In the last session, we ended talking about the satisfaction of living a meaningful life. In this last session, we're going to turn the corner, we're going to head for the finish line, and we're going to talk about how God intends for your life and your talents to be a part of the greatest cause on earth and the greatest mission that any human being, man or woman, has ever engaged in. If you're a follower of Jesus, you have to ask, how can my faith-driven entrepreneurial exploits, how can they serve the Great Commission? One of the biggest myths in the Christian church, and I hope you've heard that reiterated numerous times throughout our time together. One of the biggest myths is that calling to use your life in God's Great Commission is some kind of sacred mystical experience that is reserved only for a select few in the body of Christ. But see, here's the truth. That calling to leverage your life for the Great Commission and for the mission of God, that was included in the call to follow Jesus. And when Jesus called people to himself in Matthew 4:19, he said, "Follow me, and I will make you fishers of men," which means when you accepted Jesus, you accepted the call to mission. Here's the deal. Historically, ordinary believers have always been the tip of the gospel spear. If you go back and you study it, the gospel has always traveled around the world faster on the wings of business than it has even through apostolic effort. That was certainly true in the book of Acts. A very famous Christian historian, mission historian named Stephen Neal, wrote a book called The History of Christian Missions. And he says the only thing that is more remarkable than the rapidity of the spread of the gospel in the first century was its anonymity. He said, by the end of the first century, you had three great church planting centers. He said, what they all three have in common is that we don't know who founded any of the churches in Antioch, Alexandria, or Rome. Acts 11 tells you the story of the founding of the church in Antioch, and all it says is that some brothers who were filled with the Spirit came there and planted the church in Antioch. Some brothers is Luke, who wrote the book of Acts. It's his way of saying a bunch of guys who are not significant enough for me to even tell you their names. They're like the credits at the end of the movie, bystander number 3. You're never going to hear about these guys again. They're just some ordinary guys. If these guys, these men and women, they planted a church that would ultimately one day send out the Apostle Paul and more missionaries in the first century than any other church. Well, see, friend, the same thing is true today. I read this recently. I thought this was pretty astounding. If you add up all the evangelical missionaries in what we call the 1040 window, which is between the 10th and the 40th parallel, where most of the unreached peoples live, people who have little to no access to the gospel. If you add up all the evangelical missionaries from every denomination, that number is about 40,000. And praise God for them. We need 10 times that many. But if you take the number of Americans, just United States citizens, who are working in so-called secular employment, business ventures, ordinary business in the 1040 window, that number is 2 million. All right, well, if demographic trends are the same, which I assume they are, that means, 36% of them identify as born again? Even if we write off 2/3 of that number as not serious about their faith and only took 1/3 of that number, right, that would mean that of the 2 million that are there, 200,000 are serious followers of Jesus who put their faith in a significant place in their life. What if they understood that God had given them this open door of business in the 1040 window as a place where they could, in addition to doing their business with excellence, they could also be disciple-making disciples? You would increase the mission force in the least reached part of the world from 40,000 to 240,000 without spending another dime. We hear a lot of talk today about a lack of funds in getting missionaries to some of these places, but I'm telling you, they're already there. They're called business people. I saw this happen with my own father. I mean, he was a plant manager of a textile factory for many years and was really good at what he did. And so the day that he retired, his company, multinational company, rehired him to go and set up a plant, a textile plant over in the 1040 window. And there, he was over there for about 18 months, and he and my mom, they worked side by side with some Asian business people that they were able to bring to faith in Christ and help get a church started. Total cost to mission boards in the church, $0. In fact, we made money on the deal because he kept tithing the whole time he was over there. The point is, God has given some of you a key, and that key can literally unlock the nations. Proverbs 22, wise King Solomon said, "Do you see somebody skilled in their work? I tell you, they will serve before kings. So here's my question. Like I said, we hear a lot today about the need for more missionaries, the need for more funding, and that's true. But what if God was behind this lack of funding as his way to remobilize and re-engage a group of Christians in the workplace that have always been the tip of the gospel spear? That's always been his strategy. What if he was returning us to the book of Acts when a bunch of merchants and carpenters and fishermen and entrepreneurs without seminary degrees or formal religious training turned the world upside down? One of the greatest illustrations of this in Christian history, I think, comes from the time of the Reformation. There was a man by the name of William Tyndale. He was a priest, a seminary-trained guy, and he began to read the Bible in the original languages and discovered that the church of his day was not really teaching the gospel. And so he translated it into common English. He was one of the first guys to put the Bible in the vernacular of the English language. And so the established church was very angry at this because it made them lose control. And so, man, they took William Tyndale captive, and eventually he would be burned at the stake. His last words were, "Lord, open the King of England's eyes. The day will come, I pray, when the average schoolboy in England will know more about the Bible than the common priest does today." A lot of people, if they know Christian history, they've heard of William Tyndale. In fact, a major publishing company is named after him now. What they don't know is that you would never have heard of William Tyndale if it weren't for a guy named Humphrey Monmouth. Humphrey Monmouth, kind of a strange name, but Humphrey Monmouth was somebody that William Tyndale led to Christ. And Humphrey Monmouth owned this large network of ships that he used to take different kind of goods all throughout the English Empire. And what he did when Tyndale translated the Bible is he smuggled this Bible into all the parts of the English-speaking world. Because of the money he made from his shipping industry, he was able to fund Tyndale and the little seminary that Tyndale began to run to train other pastors. It was because of Monmouth's generosity and because of his using his business skill to serve William Tyndale in this that when the King of England decided he was going to kill William Tyndale and recollect all the Bibles, he could never get to them because Monmouth had spread them too far around the world. You would never have heard of Tyndale had it not been for a kingdom-minded business professional who understood that he also had a role in the Great Commission. What I'm telling you is that God has a role for Tyndales, William Tyndales, and God uses Humphrey Monmouths. I would imagine some of you will find yourself in that Monmouth category, and you're going to be somebody that God uses in an amazing way to take the gospel to places that it's yet to go. Now, here's one last thing, really quickly. We also know that in today's culture, more and more people, even in the Western world, have to be reached outside of the church. We're living in a culture where more and more people identify as none on a religious survey. These are not the kinds of people that just make their way into church services and hear the gospel. I got a friend who lives outside of London, and he pointed me to a study where 70% of British people say they have no plans of ever stepping foot inside a church. It's not that they're mad at the church, it's like a different world. Why would life carry them into a church? And he says if that's going to radically change how we think about reaching those people. Because if we're depending on simply better sermons and better music and better guest services to reach people, well, we're going to have awesome services for people who are never going to be there to experience them. We don't want to see the future of Christianity as increasingly fewer and flashier mega churches keep competing for larger pieces of a rapidly shrinking pie. All right, we're going to need to grow the pie. And the way that we grow the pie is by equipping people to take the gospel into the workplace and in appropriate ways through the excellence of their work and the way they love their fellow workers or their employees, be able to share the gospel with them there. God is prepared to use you, entrepreneur, in that process. Consider this one last thing as we close. We said this in the first session. 39 of the 40 miracles in the book of Acts happen outside of the church. That means you are in the place that God most wants to work. As a guy who works in the church, I don't get that privilege. You get to be in the place where God wants to do the majority of his miracles. And also, let me just say, that's all the more reason if you're a business owner that you should consider sponsoring something like corporate chaplaincy, because that enables somebody with gospel intentionality to meet your people in the place they spend most of their time and they experience most of their stress, and that is the workplace. That's what this whole series and all this material that my friend Henry Kastner and I have put together, it's what it's all about. It's about equipping you to put your yes on the table to God so that God can use you in the place that he has equipped you for. The skills, the ambitions, the dreams you have, friend, they're not accidental. It's all part of his plan. You are specially designed by him with a purpose in his kingdom. Our prayer has been and is that you will step up and use those things according to the purposes for which God gave them to you.
I knew that when I asked JD to join us in this video series, of course, he's going to talk a lot about mission. I'm really glad he brought it. He talked about it in personal experience with his dad and with himself. And I think it's really important for us as faith-driven entrepreneurs to understand what that means as well. What does that mean for us to be able to be a beacon of hope for others more broadly, maybe in our city and maybe even overseas? Is there an opportunity for you to minister to mentor, to help maybe an overseas entrepreneur that's just getting started? It's been great to have you with us these last 8 sessions. I've enjoyed it very much. It's been a great honor for me to work with JD and the folks at Right Now Media that I'm just really excited to work with. Our hope is that during this session that you've been able to lean into more about your calling, about what does it look like to be a faith-driven entrepreneur, the why of a faith-driven entrepreneur, and the where and the how, and that you'll come back to us and let us know the things that really resonate with you, but also the things that you think we need to pick up on the next time we do something like this. Having you tune into this and having you interact with us on our website and the comments that we get from our podcast are an incredible encouragement to us. So please keep them coming. Tell us how we can be better. The last encouragement I want to leave you with is that you will seek out God for all of your important business decisions. And you'll do that in community that can hold you accountable, make sure that indeed you are searching Him out and His plan for your life and for your business. Thank you very much for having been with us. It's been a great honor for me to be with you. Thank you, and may God bless you and your business.